Welcome to Maker Projects with Vinyl and Craft Cutters, brought to you by Diane Brancasio and Leilani Rozier of the MIT Edgerton Center K-12 Maker Team. You will learn how a vinyl and craft cutter can be used effectively in the classroom by students on maker projects or by the teacher to create custom classroom materials. Vinyl and craft cutters are the new low-cost workhorses of a creative classroom. The student experience includes graphic design, creativity, problem solving, the use of digital fabrication tools, and careful attention to process. Vinyl cutter machines and the materials commonly used with them are inexpensive compared to other digital fabrication tools. However, the products are often professional looking, unique, and most importantly, meaningful to the creator. Here's what we'll do in this presentation. We'll go over what is making, show you the basics of a vinyl and craft cutter, show you a vinyl craft cutter in action with a sample project, take a deep look at what students do on a project in terms of selecting and processing graphics, go over our recommended image processing tools, and then go over quite a few classroom projects that use the vinyl craft cutter really well. Let's get started. Hi there, I'm Diane Brancasio, and I work at the MIT Edgerton Center. I lead our K-12 Maker initiative, where we support K-12 teachers in integrating making into any subject. We help create projects and environments that drive students to be engaged and collaborative, empowered in their learning, skilled in critical thinking as well as technology, and exposed to STEM concepts and fields. We define making as a creative process where people work in community with others and use physical tools to produce something meaningful. The maker projects that we help teachers create are open-ended, hands-on, and personal. Students are encouraged to create things that are important to them and ask their own questions along the way. It adds a human dimension that enhances student learning. Making can be an entry point for students who are more interested in the cool technology than the academic content. Digital fabrication tools, like the vinyl and craft cutter, are powerful motivators for tech-savvy kids. A good project can get kids to delve deeper academically than they otherwise might. We're going to show you how you can bring this experience into your classroom with projects that use the vinyl cutter and meet your educational goals.
Hi, I'm Leilani. I'm a teacher coach and content developer with the Edgerton Center's K-12 Maker initiative. Let's take a look at vinyl cutter basics. Vinyl cutters and craft cutters are like automatic X-Acto knives that trace the shapes created in graphics software. There are large models designed for professional use which only cut vinyl from big rolls. These are great for producing large decals and high volumes of promotional items like stickers or club t-shirts. More versatile, though, are the small tabletop vinyl and craft cutters that handle a large variety of materials, cost less, and are designed for hobbyists. Both types of vinyl cutter can be used in the classroom, but we think the small models are better suited to student projects. We'll mostly be featuring samples and demos of the Cricut, Explore Air, and Maker models that we use in our own Makerspace at the Edgerton Center. We really like to recommend vinyl cutters not just because they're cool, and they are pretty cool, but because they are a super accessible way to bring digital fabrication experiences to your students. Strictly in terms of cost and usability, there's a really low barrier to getting started. Craft cutters are portable, which is great for transportation and sharing. Then there's cost. For the cost of a reliable Dremel 3D printer, or about $1,400, I could purchase 4 Cricut vinyl cutters ranging from $240 to $370 each, and give lots more students access to opportunities for digital fabrication. Materials can be pretty cheap, too. Vinyl isn't too expensive, but you can cut so much more than vinyl. Free and low-cost materials like paper, cardstock, and salvaged manila folders work great. Craft foam works well, too. Once you and the students get comfortable using a vinyl cutter, you can experiment with specialty material like textiles, cling film, stick-on vinyl, or iron-on fabric decoration. Multiple materials can be used together for interesting work, and 2D pieces can be folded or connected to make 3D objects. In terms of the student experience, learning to work with a vinyl and craft cutter is pretty easy, and the end product usually looks quite polished, even when made by beginners. Much better and faster than you can do with a pair of scissors or a handheld X-Acto knife. If you've ever been the kid who can't cut a straight line, you know how frustrating it can be to work on crafting projects without the fine motor skills to realize your ideas. But a vinyl cutter can give all of your students the confidence to create something they can be proud of. As in many other maker projects, making a personalized project with the vinyl cutter gives students a chance to practice planning and executing a project on multiple levels, from the big picture to the fine details. After coming up with an idea that meets teacher-assigned criteria, students using vinyl cutters have to follow a multi-step process. They create or source graphics for cutting, then use shortcut sites, drawing hacks, or graphic design software to customize and process the graphics into a file that can be cut. Depending on the intricacy of the design and the material they're using, creating the final product can also take a few steps after the craft cutter has done the bulk of the work. Even though it's much easier than cutting fully by hand, with all these steps, there's still a lot of room for error, forcing your students to practice critically evaluating the feasibility of their designs and pushing the limits of their graphic design tools to modify their images. After all the steps they take completing a project, students are usually quite proud of the things they make. And as you coach them to build their troubleshooting and communication skills, your classroom starts developing into a community of experts, always coming up with great ideas you never expected. Let's slow down and walk through a simple project from start to finish. This is a luminaria made out of copy paper that we created on our trusty Cricut machine, a kind that you might find in a craft store like Michael's. You can see paper bag luminarias lighting up the walkways to homes throughout the American Southwest during the Christmas season. The roots can be traced back through the roadside bonfires of Latin American Christmas traditions all the way to pagan practices in Spain. When traders brought Chinese lanterns to the Southwest in the 1700s, people loved them, but they were too expensive to really become popular. When the paper bag made its way to the Southwest in 1872, it was so accessible and popular as a paper lantern alternative, people are still using it today. Recently, luminarias have become pretty popular all across the U.S., and for decorations and special occasions year-round. Let's see how we can make one with the Cricut and some plain old 8.5 by 11 copy paper, glue or tape, and the light. You can print out a pre-marked template ready for students to use with the vinyl cutter, or have them measure and mark the cut and fold lines themselves. We'll give you the link to our step-by-step guide for operating the Cricut. You can also find lots of tutorials online for your specific make and model of vinyl or craft cutter. First, open your machine's design space software, updating if necessary. Always find and install updates the morning before a class if possible. Upload the image you want to cut and modify it as needed. And insert the image into your virtual mat. Move it. Add shapes and other images. Add text. Check that your material is laid out on the real mat the way you intend, and make sure your virtual layout matches. Choose your material, send the design to the machine, and cut. Watch your design as it cuts in case you spot a problem and need to cancel your job. Also, it's pretty fun to watch. Remove the pieces that aren't part of your final design. Cut and fold the paper as marked, and glue or tape it shut to create a bag. For ready-made bags, a variation would be to cut your design onto a sheet of sticker vinyl, weed out the extra bits with a paper clip, pin, or weeding pick. Use a piece of masking tape or transfer paper to grab the sticker and transfer it to your bag. The traditional luminaria uses a real candle and a handful of sand to weigh it down, but we're going to use a fire-safe LED candle. The safe version is still really nice in the dark. A really cool thing about designing for the vinyl cutter is students get to practice critical thinking through tool selection and spatial reasoning. There's actually quite a lot to think about when creating graphics for a vinyl cutter. So, what's in a graphic? We can categorize everything our students are going to cut into 3 groups. Shapes, where the exact size isn't super important. You can use simple shortcuts like Google Slides or the picsvg.com conversion site to process and save graphics like these. Then you have shapes where the size has to be very specific and accurate, like for math manipulatives, scale models, or other functional items that need to fit or fold together. For these, you'll need software that can easily generate graphics at specific sizes like Vector, Gravit Designer, or Inkscape. Then you have text. Text is a bunch of shapes, right? But it's easy to overlook the many tiny shapes that make up text, so text deserves special recognition. Text graphics often need a little extra handling to hold all the pieces together. Shortcuts and the graphic design programs will help you do this in a variety of ways. There is some really amazing art that just won't cut on a vinyl cutter, no matter how you process it. How can you tell the designs that work from the designs that won't? It will take some trial and error for new users to really learn and remember what works. As they begin designing, selecting, and processing graphics for a vinyl cutter, here are some things you can train them to look for and think about. Icons. Graphics that communicate an idea. Graphics with simplified shapes. Graphics with a high contrast level that can work in black and white. Use of positive and negative space. And the overall size and complexity of the graphics details. Let's talk about icons. Icons are simple graphics that communicate ideas. Think about emojis, logos, signs, and doodles. Simple abstract graphics like these tap into the symbolic language part of our brain by capturing the essence of a thing without needing to look exactly like it. I mean, this isn't what a real face looks like. But we also recognize these two dots in an arc as a smiling face. A nice bonus is that simple icons tend to be pretty easy for the machine to cut quickly. If your students are looking to make something more true to life, encourage them to use simplified shapes. Think single color graphics with easily identifiable outlines like silhouettes, or images with bold dimension-defining shadows that let your brain infer a 3D image from just a few dark shapes. To get a simple outline or shadow from a color photo, you can use Google Slides to adjust the brightness and contrast of an image. Images that are or can easily be turned into a single color black and white image are best. Remember, cutting is an either-or operation. There is no color or grayscale on a vinyl cutter. Converting color and grayscale images to black and white sometimes leaves you with unexpected blobs, and you can erase those in your vinyl cutter space. Let's talk about positive and negative space. When you look at a graphic, what you consider to be the image is the positive space, and the rest is the negative space. So here's a famous example. When you look at this picture, do you see a vase? Then we'd say the black part is the positive space and the white part is the negative space. Or maybe you see faces. In that case, we'd say the white part is positive space and the black part is negative space. If you invert the black and white parts of an image, does it change your perception? Do the same shapes jump out at you in the same way? Now, what does this mean for a vinyl cutter project? Think. After a machine cuts on all the outlines of your graphic, is it the positive or negative space that you want to use in your final product? How will that look? How will it change with different lighting or a colored background? How easy is it to save the positive space versus the negative space to actually use in your final product? One last thing to look out for, the size and complexity of details in your graphics. Small text, tiny cutouts, and fine lines like the skinny little wisps of this dandelion design can be difficult for the cutter to read. They are also difficult for the knife to cut reliably, and very fine strips of positive space will tear, crumple, or even lift off and tangle the knife. We've sort of salvaged this dandelion, but imagine it in the hands of a very angry 7th grader. And if you wanted to use the positive space from this project, just forget about it. Some fine details can be cut. Let's compare this chunkier dandelion design. No contest. A good rule of thumb is to make sure all the shapes in your graphic are wider than 2 millimeters or 1/16 of an inch. A nice bonus is with bold details, both the positive space and negative space are easy to keep intact. It's good to test and learn the limits of your own machine to get a sense of what works, but expect to tear up a little material along the way.
You probably noticed we've been processing the graphics a bit before uploading them to Cricut Design Space, the computer interface that controls the vinyl cutter. This processing is often a necessary step. Fortunately, all of the tools we're recommending here are free and browser-based, which is great for Chromebook classrooms. Here are a few image processing tools that we recommend for beginner to intermediate designers.
I'll show some of the best uses for each. But first, a quick word about image file types. There are basically two types of images, those based on pixels, which are dots of color, and those based on vectors, which are small lines and shapes with a color fill. For reference, the Adobe Photoshop program works in pixels while Adobe Illustrator works in vectors. PNG and JPG or JPEG files are pixel-based, with JPEG files being smaller and lower quality. SVG files are scalable vector graphics, vector files that can get bigger and smaller without losing resolution. When finding images online, the most common types are JPEGs and PNGs. They're very convenient for all sorts of processing. However, the best graphics for a vinyl and craft cutter are SVGs. The image processing platforms that we're recommending here can all save graphics as SVGs and often in several other formats. To prepare graphics for the cutter, you upload them to Cricut's DesignSpace platform and create a new project. The DesignSpace interface does best with SVG files, especially for complex shapes. It can definitely take in JPEGs or PNGs, but it may round the corners when processing them to be cuttable shapes, as shown in this example. A really nice thing about the Cricut DesignSpace software is that it has good text and shape functionality. So you can add finishing touches or sometimes do the whole project in the DesignSpace interface. A downside of this software is that you'll need to have a desktop or laptop computer, not a Chromebook, connected to the vinyl cutter when you're using it. That's because the DesignSpace software must be downloaded and there's currently no browser app. The teachers we've worked with haven't found this to be much of a problem, as they have a dedicated computer with the vinyl cutter or someplace in the Makerspace. Now I'm going to show several software tools and how they're useful in image processing for the vinyl cutter. PickSVG.com is a website. It's great for simplifying an image, adjusting color, inverting, and of course, creating an SVG vector file from a pixel type file. Take a look at this example. Let's say you find a graphic you like, but it has all sorts of text and thin lines. Copy it or trace it onto white paper, and then use a marker to make the lines thicker. Take a picture or scan the image, crop it, and upload it to PickSVG. Then you can see which of the ready and invert filters will work best till you get the look you want, and then download the SVG. This process is a great way to be expressive. Draw your own unique shapes, images, or logos, take a picture, upload it to the site, and create a cuttable image. Google Slides is the next platform I want to show you. Slides has all the functionality of Google Draw, allowing you to add text, images, and shapes, and arrange their order from front to back. The images can be recolored, adjusted, and inverted, as you saw earlier in this presentation. Another benefit, though, of Google Slides is that each slide can be exported individually and in SVG format. You may want to share a slide deck with your class that contains a library of graphics, and then have each student work on their own slide, but be able to see the others and get inspiration from the other students as they go through the project. Many image processing tools now have a feature I call geometric logic, where you can select two shapes and perform functions like union, intersection, difference, or subtraction on two of the shapes. In this slide, you can see what the resulting shape is for each of those functions. My newest go-to tool is vector.com, VECTR.com. This browser-based app is free, easy to use, and provides the geometric logic function that I just described. You can use the pen tool to create one of the geometric shapes Then use the logic function to easily crop out extraneous pieces of the image. Here's a quick demo. I'm going to use geometric logic to crop a piece out of a bigger image. First, I drop a JPEG into vector, and then I use the pen tool to outline the part that I want to keep. After I've made this path, I can click on it, move the nodes just a little bit to see that I have all the parts that I want, none of the parts that I don't want. Now on the left here, I have the path and the image. It's important that the path is above the image for the logic to work. So I can now select either by doing Control A for all, or I can select the two here, or I can box select. What's going to happen is the logic stuff menu comes up here. So I can unite, subtract, intersect, or exclude. I'm going to choose intersect. And now I can export this as an SVG, and I've got the picture I want. Vector also makes alignment easy with snapping features, allows you to set specific sizes for your shapes, has grouping functionality, and has a visibility toggle for each shape. As its name implies, Vector will export your canvas or just a select part of it as an SVG file. It's really a pretty good program for a lot of really simple and quick image processing. Finally, let's take a look at Gravit Designer, a free graphics program that has both browser-based and downloadable versions. Gravit Designer has all the functionality of Vector.com and more. However, the interface is a bit more complicated. On the other hand, it's a really good graphic design platform that's easier to use than Adobe Illustrator. The basic version is free, and it does everything we needed to do for a vinyl cutter and a laser cutter in the lab. One of the ways that Gravit Designer is especially useful is in path editing, which can really be helpful in simplifying an image or smoothing out an SVG. Sometimes after processing a color or pixel image, such as this, into black and white, we'll get accidental fine detail. Even after converting it to the SVG, we're going to see that there's a really bumpy path. So we can click these, we can get rid of them, the extra pieces that we don't want to have to cut, or we can look at all the nodes and start to simplify. Get rid of a lot of things and just get to the look that we want without all these extra bumps. So now you've seen these tools. It's up to you to choose the best image processing tools for your classroom and get ready to do some great projects on the vinyl cutter. Here's how you can bring this experience into your classroom with projects that use the vinyl cutter and meet your educational goals, whether they're academic or technical learning. Each project promotes some or all of the 4 C's: creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. Let's dive in. In the Festive Flashlights project, students build popsicle stick flashlights, then add a fold-up reflector and a custom-shaped screen. Students can design their own custom-shaped screens or decorate some provided by the project leader. We've seen this activity happily done with elementary and middle school kids. The material is white cardstock, and we used a color-changing LED, but any LED will be fine. The fold-up reflectors have score lines, so they fold up easily. The Cricut vinyl cutter comes with a scoring tool and an option to make score lines in the Design Space interface app. The Festive Flashlight project relates well to celebrations of light, but could be adapted to many themes. It can be used as an electronics and hand fabrication project with a personal element or a theme-based project with a technical element. We used this project as an outreach activity and made all the materials in advance. It's an opportunity for the teacher or makerspace leader to use the vinyl cutter to prepare classroom materials in advance. If you're interested in trying it out, this project is published on our Instructables page and includes files for the cutouts as well as instructions for the electronics assembly. The Who We Are quilt works well as an introductory project. The prompt for this project was to choose 2 or 3 things that are meaningful to you, an object, animal, or plant, and arrange them together in a 4-inch square. It requires lots of thought in composing the square, choosing images, fabricating the square, and assembling into a quilt or banner with the group. The materials are brightly colored cardstock, and the squares came out looking pretty good, even if they weren't designed or cut very well. We've used this project as an icebreaker and an intro to the process of vinyl cutting, but it could easily have more academic content. The theme could be characters in a novel, elements in the periodic table, historic events, or significant artifacts of a culture. There are a lot of things to do in this project, from designing the graphic to fabricating the pieces to arranging the final product. No one can do it all on their own, and it provides a great opportunity for collaboration and critical thinking. Papel picado is a decorative craft made by cutting elaborate designs into sheets of tissue paper, stringing them together, and hanging them as a banner. Considered a Mexican folk art, papel picados are commonly displayed for both secular and religious occasions, and now you can purchase custom banners to celebrate a wedding or birth. The prompt for this project was to pick a concept in geometry and showcase it on a piece of papel picado banner. The geometric concepts shown here are symmetry in snowflakes and starfish, the golden mean, and fern fronds as fractals. A way to get started can be to make a template, such as the grid shown here, and add the images to the grid. Multiples can be made of each piece in a range of colors, so a large space can be decorated. This project can be adapted to many content areas. I recommend that you stick to graphics and avoid text, as it can be really hard to cut out. T-shirt projects are great ways for people to express themselves. Iron-on vinyl is inexpensive, easy to use, and comes in a variety of colors and patterns. We've seen high school students adorning T-shirts with poetry and images for language and humanities classes. T-shirts and outerwear tie in well to social justice themes and activism as well. Iron-on graphics are great for branding. In our lab, we have work shirts for our Makerspace mentors. We tried putting a graphic on them by making a screen out of regular vinyl, then spray painting it, kind of a low-budget silk screening. You can see in this picture that it didn't work very well. Turns out the iron-on materials work just as expected. You can now buy inexpensive T-shirt presses that don't take up much space, but it's fun to see kids use an iron. One of the best ways to use a vinyl cutter is to cut vinyl stickers. Vinyl sheets are inexpensive and colorful, and the stickers are usually removable. Stickers can be used on fundraising items like water bottles or notebooks. You can build school culture with branding for athletic or academic clubs or teams. Stickers are also great for custom signage, especially in the makerspace. Stickers can even go right on the wall for a really professional look. In the Math Mobiles project, students experiment with the equations for balancing forces and get good at calculating area. They start by designing shapes and calculating the area for each one. The pieces will be cut out of foam sheet, so the area is now a representation of the weight. Then they create a balanced equation where each side of the balance is the sum of each weight times its distance from the fulcrum. After cutting out the pieces, they can hang them on a rod and test to see if their calculations worked. A simpler form of this is for the teacher to provide pre-cut shapes, have the students set up equations, calculating area, and spacing apart the shapes. This project was done using the vector.com platform, using its dimensioning functionality. It worked out really well. We plan to put it on our Instructables page later this year. The last project I want to show is where the teacher uses the vinyl cutter to make materials for the classroom. In this example, the teacher has made pieces that help students with music composition. These math manipulatives that show fractions are also a teacher-made classroom material. The fractions are color-coded, and students can see what combination of fractions adds up to a whole. As we wrap up this presentation, let's check back at our goal. Hopefully, you've learned how a vinyl or craft cutter can be used effectively in the classroom by students on maker projects or by the teacher to create their own custom classroom materials. We put our hearts and souls into creating the K-12 Maker Lab, featuring training and resources for educators. We're committed to helping teachers engage and empower their students with hands-on, student-focused creative projects that support their academic subjects. Here are some links to our newsletter and to all of our Instructables. You can also find these links and lots of resources on our website, k12maker.mit.edu. In addition to our schedule of regular maker workshops, we offer custom training in schools or districts. We teach educators how to design their own projects and establish a maker culture at their school. We can also teach you how to use maker tools, train your students, and set up a school makerspace. Contact us, Diane Brancasio or Leilani Rozier, and tell us more about your school and your hopes for your students. Happy making.